Take your protein pills. The Poisoned Electrick Head story. Brian Carney. Chapter 32. Whose fucking planet? For this epic tour, we'd done some forward thinking with regard to sleeping arrangements and the most economical use of space. Everybody's bags and holdalls would inevitably consume most of it, so AF hit upon the capital idea of suspending them from the upper inside rim of the van. To facilitate this, he brought a dozen S-shaped meat hooks that his dad had acquired from the abattoir. AF pronounced it abattoir. Whilst serving their purpose, they presented obvious drawbacks, a dozen razor-sharp spikes at head height being one of them. But as usual, madness triumphed over common sense and they became an acceptable risk, further adding to the meat locker ambience of Billy's white Sub-Zero Mercedes interior. A starker contrast to Back to the Planet's double-decker tour bus would be hard to find. The first port of call was possibly Cambridge. I should remember these milestones, but I don't, and frankly I'm not surprised. Was I there? Yes. And possibly somewhere else. A large, well-equipped venue lacking in nothing but atmosphere. I imagine it performed a multitude of functions: exhibition centre, conference hall, you know the type. After the night in the cells, I was determined to approach this one with a steely professional resolve, and took, loads of persuading to stroll to the off-licence after the sound check, begrudgingly buying cans of beer, bottles of Whiteway's fortified peach wine, and anything else to get us through the long and lonely nights. On the way back, Saucy Jack made an appearance as a red Datsun slowed to a curb crawl beside us. "Andy, me old mucker, get us in on the guesty, will you?" He cheerfully crooned through the driver's window, with a cockney grin as wide as the old Kent Road. God love you. AF told him and his pal to announce themselves on the door as Chris and Sam, though I felt Chaz and Dave would have been more fitting. Chris and Sam were our one-size-fits-all ubiquitous guest names of interchangeable gender to allow for such occurrences. They were AF's brainchild, never one to miss the opportunity to pull off a scam. I can imagine him at the pearly gates, swearing blind to St. Peter that his entrance list should say Andy +1. But in all those gigs, this is the only occasion I can remember them being used. The gig itself was memorable only for the enormous teenage crowd it attracted, a reminder of the persuasive power of the music press. It was strange to play to such an audience, their minds a random-fire succession of confusing urges and impulses. Cop off, get chronically pissed, look cool, don't puke, excited about just being out en masse, giddy at the fact that any day now the world is going to reluctantly hand over the wheel and let them drive for a while. When having fun isn't a dim possibility, it's a human right like breathing, only easier and more necessary. None of these factors, of course, endeared us to them, and we received a bemused, amused reaction, our provocative vaudevillian theatrics falling on the stony ground of unfamiliarity, as appealing and snigger-generating as a flasher in the park. Nevertheless, it was a nice way to kick things off, and we left the stage with a feeling of satisfaction. After the rapid dismantling and removal of our gear, and if truth be known, this was an area we did shine in, because, number one, the sooner you do it, the sooner you can get pissed, smashed, wasted. Number two, nobody's going to do it for you. Number three, the longer you leave it, the more chance there is that something will go astray. And number four, you're the fucking support band, get the fuck out of the way. We set about the serious business of after-show partying. This as ever amounted to guzzling the allocated booze in the dressing room, then foraying to the van for further supplies. Back to the Planet had kindly said that we could help ourselves to their sizable rider within reason. But as it was the first gig, and as we had no concept of the phrase, then we wisely declined, choosing to make a sizable dent in our own supplies instead. After alternating between the van and the venue, things eventually drew to a hazy close, and both band vehicles settled down in the club car park for the night. As some of Back to the Planet's lighting and merchandise crew were yet to arrive, they offered us their spare bunks, which the sober, sensible members of our band gratefully accepted. I dimly recall refusing their offer, as I preferred sleeping in the gravel. It had moulded to my body nicely, and I couldn't be sure of my conduct in their nice surroundings. Thus ended the first night of the tour, with all the associated glamour of life on the road. Things continued apace throughout the 20-odd dates, the normal parameters of daily existence gently disappearing like the only conscious party guest, and the rules of reasonable conduct with them. There were various characters following the planets to every venue on the tour, so they soon became familiar to us. One of these was a textbook crusty, who, eyeing an opportunity, told us he was only along for our music, thus securing a ride most nights in our van. He vividly brought to mind an old Two Ronnies sketch, where they lampooned status quo, so he quickly became known as Ronnie Barker, a moniker he passively shrugged off as an occupational hazard, approaching life in the same casual manner. He spent his days pretending to be homeless and was a deft exponent of the blag. As I've mentioned before, the blag is a more aggressive cousin of the mither and is a persistent, relentless assault designed to wear down the blaggee into handing over whatever the blagger has set his sights on. Once the prize is acquired, the blagger departs wordlessly, reinforcing his delusion that he is blessed with persuasive powers and is an enchanting blend of the Artful Dodger and Raffles the Gentleman Thief. The blag was very in vogue during this period. Indeed, at its height it was as ubiquitous an accessory as dreadlocks or German paratrooper boots without laces, which inevitably made for some tiresome encounters. The catastrophic events of Brixton Academy had faded somewhat, but for Al, they continued to haunt him. It became apparent that health-wise, he hadn't really shaken it off, and as the days passed, he visibly deteriorated, spending his time lying in the van and revealing that he'd been unable to eat for days. We loved to laugh in the face of adversity, if it was someone else's, so Al became the Phantom, after he'd frightened a fellow sound engineer when he tapped him on the shoulder to introduce himself. He looked terrible, black rings under his eyes and the weight literally falling off him, but of course the severity of the situation passed us by. At one point we stopped at a hospital in an attempt to get him something, but we didn't stop the tour. When we did get the chance of a few days off, we returned home, figuring that Al should recuperate under the watchful gaze of Ma and Pa Carney. When we walked in, my dad took one look at him and hit the roof. I thought he was going to beat the shit out of me. To make matters worse, the family doctor told him it was his own fault for leading a deviant lifestyle. It turns out that his son, who was an old school friend of Al's, had recently run off to join the peace convoy. Anyway, Al recovered, and our folks reluctantly let us back on the road. Looking back now, one gig blurs into the next with only the daily routine connecting them, which usually began with a battle between a fatigued psyche eager to languish and a bladder desperate to empty itself. The bladder eventually won as a staggered procession stumbled over each other, trying to avoid stepping on heads and body parts before reaching the door and the rain-soaked tarmac beyond it. Our collective awakening was as painful and brutal as anything David Attenborough ever narrated over, slowly reaching a dim equilibrium and the inevitable search for food. We all had our own stay-alive options. Mine was bananas in milk, whereas AF favoured a spliff and a can of special brew. Some venues stand out in the memory more than others. I remember Worcester as a small-town theatre, more accustomed to hosting the likes of Sooty, but the good news was that we had a bigger dressing room than the puppets. In fact, our dressing room contained a cupboard full of theatre clothes, an incongruous mix of military hats, fezzes and tuxedos, probably left over from Worcester amateur players' recent production of Springtime for Hitler. Predictably, most of it ended up on stage that night, and Bill became attached to a Luftwaffe peaked cap, which he purloined and insisted on wearing all the next day. He cut a bizarre figure strolling through the quaint tea-shop landscape of Gloucester, nonchalantly swigging Thunderbird wine as old dears scuttled into antique shops in abject fear. It rather brought to mind the day-departed Cid, inflicting his repugnant self on the good folks of Paris. Glasgow evokes memories of ordering a pint of heavy and being directed towards the local dealer who, Rasta from the waist up, Rob Roy from the waist down, held court at the end of the bar. But it's the journey from Glasgow that really sticks in the mind. Ronnie was aboard as ever, and another guy who was heading south and had asked for a lift. The following night's show was Manchester, so a good 5-hour drive stretched before us, and our new passenger found us in unusually gregarious spirits. This was probably down to that night's gig, which had been a blinder. We were really hitting our stride. The support slot does have its advantages. For a start, you've nothing to prove because most people's expectations are low anyway. They surveyed the proceedings as a mild distraction, something to be endured before the main event. So not only do you have freedom to experiment, but it becomes a game to try to penetrate that preordained apathy we're all guilty of. I once spent the whole of a support band set in the bar, only begrudgingly going in to catch the last song at someone's insistence, where I was greeted with a screaming, half-naked singer doused in blood. Alas, apathy had caused me to miss the birthday party. Someone asked the new guy in the van what he did, in a what do you do kind of way, not prying as such, but half expecting the answer, nothing, which was often the standard response. Nothing had become the career choice of a generation when faced with the prospect of anything, which had been the career choice of the previous one. The trouble with nothing, though, was it was a full-time job, making it nigh on impossible to fit anything in. Our friend did have a trade, though, albeit one rarely seen on the job centre notice board. He was an acid dealer, and sensing a sudden business opportunity, he set up stall. A reasonable enough assumption to make when trapped in the back of a van with a psychedelic band on a 5-hour journey. But he had overlooked one small detail. As John Cooper Clarke so elegantly put it, we had the one thing money can't buy: poverty. 5 minutes elapsed before he announced, "Oh, fuck it, who wants a free one?" And the collective affirmative response bordered on manic. So once more we entered into one of life's more enduring philosophical questions. Namely, like scientists observing electron particles and inadvertently affecting their trajectory, did the act of ingesting LSD activate a light on a cosmic switchboard somewhere that kick-started a chain of implausible events that would otherwise not have happened? Or did it just seem that way? If so, it would certainly explain a few things, like why my acid trips always coincided with children in need. I'd sit for hours morbidly fixated by scenes of darts players from Hull sitting in a bath of beans, unable to risk going to the off-licence for fear of meeting giant mice with collection tins. It was something to think about, and the way events unfolded that evening certainly corroborates the theory. Everything was fine to begin with, better than fine even. One of LSD's properties is that it shines a big light on your life, which, depending on your circumstances at the time, can be great or the last thing you want to address. It's a glare I've been under both as hero and loser, but that night things were firmly on the good foot. And how couldn't they be? Still high on performance adrenaline, with my closest friends around me. My life was 2 parts Kerouac to 3 parts Kesey, a dash of Auf Wiedersehen pet, and topped up with X-Men, which isn't a bad place to be in anybody's book. Passing motorists clocked the nondescript white van as they overtook, no doubt imagining pallets of self-assembly furniture residing within. But beyond the chassis, a somewhat different scenario to IKEA goods was unfolding. The only similarities being that we were cheap, had funny names and collapsed easily. Big laughs were bubbling up inside us like lava lamps. Saucy Jack's grin had assumed an almost Aztec geometric splendour and was threatening to eclipse the width of the vehicle. Bill and AF performed spontaneous puppet theatre from behind the curtain that separated the back from the driver, the show culminating with P being thrown violently through the air, chair and all, after an interminable debate about his flying lessons. Our rapturous applause produced a dozen repeat performances, which, despite being identical, were well received by all, with the exception of Ronnie, who possessed a demeanour so morose that even LSD couldn't thaw it. Saucy's cohort Sean was also aboard, and was equally blessed with an East End grin that could strip paint. You've got to love these Cockney geezers, they're irrepressible. Sean once went on a stateside business trip and squeezed in a tour of college radio stations, masquerading as our manager. He prodded and pummeled a procession of graveyard shift DJs with tales of impending US tours which they bought, his machine gun delivery in stark contrast to their stoned Californian drawl. The tapes sound like park life superimposed over little fluffy clouds.
And this is Synthesis Programming for Thursday. And we've been listening to the music of Poisoned Electrick Head. out of England, and their manager is here. His name is Sean, and he would like to have us listen to the music for a while because maybe they'll come to the States and perform. And we listened to 3 tracks, What You Gonna Be, Son, The Unborn, and Immortal. And this is out on Dead Fly Records. So what else can we learn about this band?
Yeah.
They're 8-piece, you said?
7-piece.
7-piece.
Yeah, 7-piece.
Oh, they've been together for 8 years.
They've been together
Okay.
for 8 years. Yeah, we've done over 500 gigs now, nearly 600 gigs, supporting bands like Hawkwind, the Cardiacs. I'm saying names, I don't know if you over here are too familiar with those. Basically, we've just done a full UK tour with the band Back to the Planet, who have just had 3 UK top 40 singles in the last year. That was a very big success. And just genuinely, we're just building the name up for the new album, which comes out in February of next year. And then there's a full headline UK tour, hopefully a European tour. And as you said just now yourself, Janet, we hope to come over here and do a tour ourselves, basically in the whole area.
That would be great. There's a lot of places in the area that I could see these people playing at. Maybe New York, too, because they look very theatrical.
Yeah. New York is a big area for us that we're hoping to make inroads in while we're over here on this promotional visit ourselves. So yeah, if anyone's out there listening, they've got to get in touch with the station and we'll talk.
Okay, what are we listening to? Garden of Eden? Is that what this is?
We'll be listening to Garden of Eden, followed by Creature Feature.
And you said you wanted to listen to Creature Feature?
Yeah.
I like the name Creature Feature. Okay, why don't we turn the volume down here for a few seconds. And let us play Creature Feature.
The inevitable service station stop arrived, and upon disembarking, we immediately felt like outsiders. This wasn't so much down to our fried collective mental state, but for the more obvious reason that we were the only people not dressed as Michael Jackson. At 2 a.m. somewhere on the M6, this took a while to sink in. One person could be passed off as a trick of the light, but not everybody for fuck's sake. And to make matters worse, the southbound side was closed, so we had to cross the bridge to access anything. A stream of Jacksons, representing every era, paraded past us. The red leather jacket, the Billie Jean suit with half-mast kecks, the Thriller perm, the Trilby in one glove. As head fucks go, it was detailed and elaborate, and clear evidence that the cosmic switchboard had been triggered and was doing its stuff. Stifled giggles dogged our every step, and in the gents we fared no better, as Bill and I joined a row of them at the urinals. Strangers in the night, exchanging glances. Strangers in the night, robotic dances. The urge to laugh too much. Our efforts to contain it resulting in strangulated, blurted outbursts. It's close to midnight, but don't stop till you've had enough. AF's whimpering cackle puncturing the uncomfortable silence from a nearby cubicle. Angry stirs from all sides. Don't want to be starting something. They're out to get you, better leave while you can, just beat it. Upon hightailing it back to the van, we were greeted by Billy thumbing a tattered enemy, who announced in all seriousness, "Hey, Michael Jackson played at the NEC tonight." No one contradicted him, and we drove on. The incident providing us with intermittent guffaws for the next 50 miles or so, before come down and fatigue settled on the van. Sometime later, a diesel stop was required, and Billy wisely counselled against anyone wandering off, proposing the many bushes and parked-up trucks instead. I took his advice and wearily located a convenient juggernaut tyre, and after unzipping and commencing, dreamily shifted my gaze upwards. My eyes were met by those of a hideous goblin gargoyle figure, and further scrutiny revealed more legions of the undead materializing through the early morning mists. My tattered psyche scrambled to make sense of this new assault, though it was equally inclined to surrender to the cosmic prankster. A broken man with no fight left in me. I eventually ascertained that I was pissing against the ghost train. An unlikely fate, but one I evidently deserved. The odyssey continued, and before long, St. Helens began emerging from the ether. Its approach announced by a succession of ring roads and bends as people shuffled about collecting their belongings. As BJ negotiated a particularly sharp one, Ronnie put out his hand to steady himself and impaled it on one of AF's meat hooks. There are few sights to compete with an inadvertently stigmated hippie screaming in pain and disbelief at 5:30 a.m. He stood gripping his wrist inanely, repeating the mantra, "Me fucking hand!" His horror no doubt compounded by the realization that a professional beggar with a hole in his hand was dead in the water when it came to small currency. To placate him, we offered to tend his wounds at the first house we came to, which was mine. I frog-marched him in and rapidly doused him in Dettol before the van drove off. He was back on board so fast he maybe thought he'd imagined it. I didn't know where he was staying that night. I just knew it wasn't my place. Is there a sign above my door saying Wounded Crusty Storage Centre? I think not. He ended up at P's place with the other guy. P lived in a caravan in the grounds of a semi-constructed old folks' home with a huge wall around it. He was miles from anywhere with only chickens for company. We called him the Selfish Giant. After Manchester, the tour thundered on further south through Roman market towns, all frequent hosts of the Antiques Roadshow. They occasionally throw in a token northern location, but they're never quite comfortable with the idea, are they? You just know Hugh Scully has a car somewhere with the engine running. Then veered west into Somerset, where AF's cider senses began to tingle. He claimed to know of a farm that sold scrumpy by the gallon, that wasn't too far off our route. As ever, he painted a glorious picture, a rose-tinted poplarking scene, where rosy-cheeked mutton-chopped artisans and ample-breasted milkmaids were waiting to serve ambrosial nectar from overflowing oak barrels. Every time he opened his mouth, you felt like you were in an episode of Sergeant Bilko, and like Ernie's punch-drunk platoon, we fell for it every time. But on this occasion, he was right. For a start, the place actually existed, and did indeed sell cider from huge barrels, and for a ludicrously cheap price. The barrels were housed in a small barn, and numbered from 1 to 12 on a sweet to dry scale. Pictures of satisfied customers adorned the walls, mainly the local police and fire services. Huge, ruddy-faced men, arms folded and shoulder to shoulder in boozy solidarity. This seemed as good a recommendation as one could ask. Not that we needed any persuasion, and we all bought 2 gallons each. Had we any to hand, we would have donated a group shot for the wall to complement the other pissheads in pointy helmets and uniforms. This new and copious alcohol supply kept us in the mild inebriation we had come to rely on. It provided a laminated sheen to the daily rigours, blurring the edges and smoothing off any sharp corners. Scrumpy is particularly suited to this. It goes down easy and leaves you feeling slightly underwater. And the day was punctuated by periodic swigs from the ubiquitous containers. Relations with the planets had been genial but restrained, with us maintaining a polite distance to avoid pissing them off unnecessarily. If they wanted to feel like they were underwater, they went to the swimming baths. We weren't that organised. If it didn't sell beer or sesame seed buns, then chances were it passed us by, irrespective of its unique contributions to the English heritage. That night after the concert, we found ourselves sat with a few of the planets, who were intrigued by the gallon jugs we were all lovingly clinging onto. So we nabbed some glasses from the bar and initiated them into the illicit pleasures of scrumpy. "Jesus, that's fucking disgusting," they collectively opined, but slowly and steadily it disappeared, and all reservation and distance with it. A most boisterous and congenial evening ensued, culminating in their normally reserved chanteurs, demanding we "get your dicks out, you northern fuckers," before the venue called time and turfed us out to our respective vehicles. We decided to drive a while in the direction of the next venue, and that's when the more sinister properties of prolonged scrumpy exposure began to manifest themselves. A confused, strained and aggressive tone had settled on us, with tempers fraying at the slightest thing. AF had inexplicably brought along his nephew's cot mattress, one of those white plastic jobs with ducks on it, and its safety became paramount. Had James Marshall Hendricks himself deposited his sunburst Monterey Strat with us for safekeeping, it would have come a poor second to little Kenny's mattress. Sure enough, someone spilt scrumpy on it and violent scenes erupted as AF became homicidal, Knives were drawn and assorted limbs battled in a cartoon dust cloud, as, music blurring loud as ever, the van drove on into the sombre Devon night. The fallout was such that when we parked up at a service station for the night, half the band chose to sleep in the bushes rather than endure the venomous cutthroat atmosphere within. I myself found a speck by the dustbins at the entrance to the kitchens, where I soon fell into a drunken slumber. I awoke next morning to the sound of loosened phlegm being expectorated and an unmistakable death rattle cough. Looking up, I saw AF shrouded in a mist of his own making as he greeted the dawn with a volley of piss. "So this is where you've been hiding," he contemptuously quipped. Now, don't get me wrong. None of us expected our days on tour to begin with the rosy technicolor glow of Burr Lives, crooning zippity-doo-dah. But this was pushing the envelope. I gathered my ragged self together and stumbled back to the van with one objective, single-mindedly burning a hole in the opaque blur my brain had mutated into overnight. Climbing aboard, I located little Kenny's mattress and threw it into the drizzle-soaked car park. AF bristled and brought it in again. I threw it out again, and before long we were throwing punches, breaking our unwritten rule again for the second time in less than 24 hours. Mind you, 18 gallons of cider can do that to people. Bill watched events with a laconic amusement for a few seconds before stepping in and separating us effortlessly. Drunken vanity had let me forget what a hard bastard AF was, and I came off much the worse. But it wasn't about winning or losing, and it certainly wasn't about the taking part. It was about demonstrating what we'd become. Shite Club. I arrived at the next venue black-eyed and fat-lipped, much to the amusement of the planets, whose injuries amounted merely to humongous hangovers. This was a 2-night stint at Windsor, the last concerts of the tour. The anticipation of the end hung heavy and palpable in the air, tinged with sadness, relief and euphoria. A scene remains imprinted in my memory of us sitting in a field that afternoon by the river, of Bill wearing his allo allo cap and red wine being passed about, grubby, unshaven and wasted, as a team of Chariots of Fire public schoolboys thundered past us in white shorts and vests. Such poetic juxtapositions occur all too rarely in life. If someone had photographed it and we'd used it as an album cover, we'd have been accused of clumsy class war commentary. Those last 2 nights' performances were the best of the tour for both bands. Ferocious outbursts of joyous energy. And then it was all over, and we returned to reality, or St. Helens' version of it. I saw Bill a few nights later in a local drinking dive. He threw me a glance that spoke volumes about disorientation and withdrawal pain. I threw him one back that simply said, "I know, Bill, I know."
Poisoned electric, poisoned electric head, poisoned electric head, 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 poisoned electric,